Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today is Monday, April 24th, 2023. I'm Michael Voris, here with our two co-hosts today, Brad Eli and Christine Niles. And filling in over there in the guest host seat is Nick Wylie. Welcome back to the set, Nick.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, faithful Catholics often find themselves aligning politically on the right, owing principally to concerns about right to life and the abortion question. However, when hanging around in politically right-wing circles, it increasingly seems like Catholics have to really be careful about whom they trust. First of all, we're going to be talking with one of our great reporters and producers here, Dr. William Mahoney, about this very prominent conservative defending pornography, because this is the sort of waters you got to swim in on the conservative side these days. Doc B, how are you?
Good. How are you, Michael?
Doing very well, bro. Okay, well, tell us more about it.
So Dennis Prager was on a show with Jordan Peterson as the host, and Jordan Peterson asked him about pornography, and his take, and Prager's take, was that, well, if you're using pornography as a substitute for your wife, that's awful. But if you're using it in addition to a healthy relationship with your wife, that's not so awful. And he also said that in Judaism, lust is not a sin, as in Christianity, where Jesus clearly teaches if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. Prager doesn't see it that way. He seems okay with it as long as you're not depriving your wife, I guess. One of the things I think striking in the I hate using the word conservative, but it's just kind of the only word that kind of umbrellas all of this, is that there's never any movement on the left, on the Marxist, communist side. They know exactly what they stand for. Nothing ever changes. The principles are stated. They're adhered to. If you step one step out of line, they kill you. On the conservative side, it's this constant amorphous changing around, not sure what it is. This is okay. It's not okay. What do you think explains that? Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you're like, what are you conserving? You know, you're conservative. And I think a lot of them, I think they come together a lot because of fiscal conservatism. They hate Marxism, they hate communism because they want to keep they want to keep the fruits of their labor. So they agree on that. With the moral issues, it starts to get very fuzzy. In this country, you can trace, like, once upon a time we had the Comstock laws, and Protestants were against, they were against abortion, they were against contraception, birth control, and then they got rid of those, and it just kind of kept snowballing from there. And that's the nature of evil. I mean, if you give it an inch, it's gonna take a mile. So, do you think somehow it just seems to me that people who are so concerned about money and the economy and taxation policy and all this sort of stuff, that, I mean, they're pretty smart people. Most of these guys are very well-to-do. They're the kind of movers and shakers behind the scenes. Why do they not see the connection between the moral failings of a culture and its eventual financial demise? So this is my opinion, but my honest opinion on that is because they themselves are not living good, upright, moral lives in some way. They've compromised in their own life in some way on some moral issues. So then they feel like, well, I can't point the finger at someone else who maybe has gone a little bit farther than I have. And like with Protestantism, with accepting contraception, for example, you just introduce cancer into your marriage and everything else. When they were against that, they took a strong moral stance against that. But as they start to compromise with that, yes, they're smart, and yes, they conserve some of their conservative ideas, but they have compromised some morality in their own life, so they start to give up on it in certain cases or make exceptions and rationalize it. Good observation. Nick's got something for you.
Yeah, B, I got a couple questions for you. So first off, I thought that Prager's defense of this was really strange, especially when we were on Matt Fradd's show. And he said that, in Judaism, we care more about actions. And you Christians, you care about intents. But what he was saying didn't really match up, because he was talking about pornography and he was talking about masturbation. And he basically was in this realm of thoughts and all, but those are clearly actions. And so I can understand what he's saying, like when he talks about, oh, well, your Jesus tells you that whenever you look at a woman with lust, that's a sin, but we Jews, we don't believe that because we're more about actions. But these are actual actions. So can you make sense of that at all?
I can't make sense out of something that's not rational, but I can make sense of how he misunderstands what's going on. And for example, our Lord saying not to look at a woman with lust in his heart, a man to look at her has already committed adultery if he looks at her with lust in his heart. He's not saying anything that's not already at least in seed in the Old Testament. He's not saying something brand new. He's giving an explanation of the moral law, and Jesus clearly fulfills the moral law. He doesn't eradicate it. The only, there's the ceremonial law, the liturgical law, and the moral law of the Old Testament. The liturgical law goes away because we have the sacrifice of the Mass. We don't have the ceremonial law, so we know from Peter, for example, that the kosher is done with. So those aren't necessary or important anymore. But the moral law stays the same, and Jesus fills it and brings it to perfection. In the Old Testament, there are plenty of examples of lusting in your heart. Let's start with David looking at Bathsheba from his rooftop. He's looking at Bathsheba. He's lusting after her. That leads to action. That leads to him killing, sending out her husband Uriah into war to die, so that David doesn't look responsible for it. Clearly, there's a procession there of sin. In the very first Psalm, David talks about this. The opening of the Psalms is blessed, happy is the man who doesn't stand in the counsel of the wicked. Doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand with the sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. And what you see there is a progression of sin. First he's walking, then he's standing, now he's sitting with them. And so this idea is very clear in the Old Testament, that it starts with the walking, it starts with the thinking, and then it progresses from there. And as far as a woman looking at a woman with lust in your heart, Job himself says, he made a covenant with his eyes not to look at a virgin. Well, what else is he talking about? So that was a thought thing. He decided to have custody over his senses. And in Hebrew thought, one more thing I'll add to this, in Jewish thought, they use, in Hebrew, the Jews talk of yetzer hara, which means wicked inclination, which is what we have from Adam and Eve. Catholicism, it's pretty much what we call concupiscence. So they're very aware of this, and they know this. So he's really just making a complete disconnect from what his own texts tell him and what he wants to believe.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, Dennis Prager claiming to be, good Jew. It's easy whenever no one else knows Hebrew and you can just throw out random Hebrew things and you're like, well, it means this. And so, yeah, him reading into Judaism, more his opinion than I guess what the Old Testament has said.
I'm just going to jump in here. That's exactly right. I'm just going to jump in here, William, because I have a question. And one of the reasons that what Prager said is so disappointing is, pornography, as we know, is not just a private sin that just affects you. What he didn't mention or didn't discuss is that when you partake in it, whether you're just watching it or paying for it, you're actually contributing to an industry that is involved in rape and sex trafficking, including child sex trafficking. Pornhub is the biggest peddler of smut on the internet and makes billions. And right now it's being sued precisely because it's posting videos of child sex crimes, and millions of people are watching it, and it's making money off of it. And so it's actually normalizing pedophilia and rape of child sex trafficking. I mean, it's disappointing that Prager wouldn't discuss those problems with porn.
No, you're right. He's made it something completely individual, and of course, you're exactly right. You're participating in a sin, and you're watching people either fornicating or committing adultery as well. Plus, then you bring in the children, like you're saying. You're connecting yourself to an incredibly wicked industry. You can't have anything to do with that. So, I agree completely. My dad told me that once when I was younger. He said, if you look at pornography, he's like, you're really participating in an orgy in your mind, and that's a very serious sin. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, and one thing people don't think about either is that regardless of how happy the woman might look on camera, the vast majority, like I don't know the percentage, but it's in the upper 90s of those women participating in that have endured some form of sexual abuse when they were children, because girls don't naturally gravitate to that. Something happens to you as a child, you're molested, something happens, and you go that route. So again, people participating in this, they're they're kind of taking part in that, and it's just very disappointing that Prager, who has a massive platform for good, would now be justifying in the eyes of, hundreds of thousands, millions of viewers that, oh yeah, it's okay to do this.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and how would he feel if it was his sister in the porn, or his cousin or something? And I mean, it's just like, these are real people, and like you say, these women are mostly very broken, and then they are used by this industry which breaks them further. Like, you can't have anything to do with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, another point, Dr. Mahoney, is that they, a lot of these folks that are the porn stars, I suppose you get up to some upper echelon or something of porndom where it doesn't apply to you, but lots of these people are, drugged up, they're high, they're, they're participating in something strictly for the money. Part of it, this is just like, what you're seeing has all kinds of levels of abuse going on there. It's kind of shocking that Prager would, come out with just such a, sort of a completely blind view of all of that. Thanks for chatting with us, Dr. Mahoney.
Welcome.
Always a pleasure to have you on. Talk to you later, B.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, I think we'd be a little remiss if we didn't bring up, because the news just dropped a little bit ago about Tucker Carlson and Fox News breaking, going their separate ways. A lot of people, I think, because this kind of fits in with what we're talking about today, about like what's on the right and what is conservative. And we sat on this very stage on 2020 and said, why is Fox calling Arizona, months before the votes are done counting? And that really started I think, an eclipse in people's minds of, well, Fox, wait a second, they're not as conservative as what people think they are. And of course, we've been noticing, we did a show we called Dispatch a number of years ago saying Fox is nowhere near as conservative as people say that it is. And now, Tucker, this could be related to the Dominion voting lawsuit. It could be related to a speech he gave Friday night at the Heritage Center where he just came out and called the left evil. I'm sure that doesn't sit very well with the uppers at Fox News. And what are you guys' thoughts on this? And CNN just dumped Don Lemon like 20 minutes later.
Maybe they'll get a show together. The two go back and forth, two cats. I guess the question is, what took it so long? What took him so long?
Yeah.
What took him so long? Because Fox News, if you really want to take a sharp pencil to it, is kind of like controlled opposition. When you get to the levels of you kind of control the narrative, and how come all these sets all are saying the same talking points within minutes of each other at the same time? There's a controlled opposition. You got both sides of the conversation more or less controlled. You really start to see that more and more at Fox.
Yeah.
You can't go very far. There are some things you can't get into. And I really believe Tucker's one of the few people I really trust out there as far as what he says. He's the Walter Cronkite when Walter never really was.
Yeah, there were some interesting things, if you remember, what came out in the discovery of the Dominion lawsuit, which settled for almost $800 million. And settling for $800 million, how much more did you think you were going to lose? The discovery process showed that, which was a little bit of disappointment, that Tucker didn't really believe a lot of what he was saying every night. They've got his texts and his emails. One of the reporters was, I remember who the reporter was, a Fox News reporter was out there, sort of, maybe not necessarily cheerleading the election was thing and Dominion voting machines suck and their whole thing was, but there was that, she was, giving it credence, I guess would be a way to say. And he's firing off an email saying she needs to be fired. And yet he's on the show, on his Tucker thing going, more cheating, rigged machines, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, wait, what is it here? And it's just weird. The whole thing, this whole media conglomerate is just weird to me. And I grew up, as you guys, I grew up in this. And this is completely, as the Italians would say, focaccia.
Right. Yeah, and as we sit here, we're not really sure why Fox News let Tucker go. We know that it was very sudden and abrupt. It was not planned from Friday, because we know Friday, Tucker was like, okay, I'll see you guys Monday. So we're not entirely sure whether it's related to Dominion or something else. But as far as Fox News, they have been controlled opposition for a while. And I think one of the biggest manifestations of that is when they decided to hire on Bruce Caitlyn Jenner as a regular contributor. Yeah. I think that actually the acceptance of Caitlyn Jenner directly led to this whole transgenderism stuff that all the conservatives are now pushing back on. Like, oh, we have to stop the trans agenda. Well, when you accepted Bruce Jenner as a so-called woman, you automatically cave to that entire
stepped
thing.
into it, right?
You have nothing to say on this. And Caitlyn Jenner himself has contributed massively to the acceptance of the whole transgender movement. So even though he's out there trying to defend these women in sports and all of that stuff, and all, it's like,
hey, you're kind of the
part
first
of this.
major domino to
You're
fall.
part of this, and Fox News, the fact that you are normalizing this behavior, you are part of all of this.
Yeah, so you can normalize it, kinda. But, well, that's a bridge too far over there, going into girls' bathrooms if you're like a coach who identifies as a woman, a male coach who identifies as a woman. The whole thing is, another thing that always struck me as weird is, okay, so maybe people don't know, but Tucker's studio is in his an annex in his house in Florida. So while the whole COVID thing was going on, he was doing his show from there. He always does his show from there. He was not in New York for years. All of a sudden, though, everybody else at Fox, Laura Ingraham, all the rest of them, Sean Hannity, they're all broadcasting from Fox. All the shows, he's the exception. Yet they're all going on about, the mandates and this, and you have to get the jab, and this is horrible, and let's do stories on the military being forced out, and blah, blah, blah. Nobody in New York was allowed to go to work unless they got the vax. So there's no way that Laura Ingraham is sitting in that studio, haven't gotten vax yet. She's on her show, like, condemning it. And it's like, what's going on there? It just doesn't seem like a legitimate media enterprise. It seems like just a business enterprise that's just going like this. And, kind of the controlled opposition to your part, Christine, to your point. And it's like, something weird's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would hope that just the things that Tucker's been saying recently in the last year or so, that he's grown up some, he's gotten some courage, he's gotten some real conservative spirit in him, and it's not this whole controlled opposition thing we're talking about, but that he actually believes what he's saying. And the fact that he's the one stretching the narrative more than anyone else, you would hope that now it's more of a Tucker uncensored thing where he can really talk about the issues, because there's so many things that you can't say on air that the majority of people through, Twitter being freed up now know is true. So many things that people believe that it's not okay to say on TV. And so you would hope that now he's able to actually acknowledge those things and do it on a much greater scale. Because his Tucker Carlson originals, the things that he's exposing with that nobody else is talking about, and just all the little things that he's doing, you would just hope that charitably now what's happening is that he's going to be able to expose it all.
I think actually he will be better. He'll be a lot better off without Fox News, because
it's a ball and chain around him right now.
It is. It's clear that there were things that he was not allowed to say. But I think one of the most courageous things he did was he could question the whole January 6th narrative.
Yeah.
He questioned that entire thing. And if you remember, he was the first to air footage of January 6th that nobody else saw. And everybody started questioning January 6th. And then, of course, the powers that be in Washington, D.C. all started flipping out, saying, oh, you can't do this, And high-ranked politicians were commenting on what Tucker Carlson was doing. Then if you notice, after that, no more January 6th footage on Fox News. And people were asking, you were going to air more, what happened? And he just didn't talk about it anymore. I'm sure that there was pressure brought to bear from the corporate executives at Fox News to Tucker saying, you can't do this anymore. We're getting too much pressure. So this move for Tucker to be totally independent I think it's going to be so much better for him. And I actually think it's going to make a lot more money.
I think if you're somebody like Joe Rogan, I think you're getting really nervous about it now. It might take, this appears to have been extraordinarily sudden. He said Friday, see you on Monday. No, he's not. But look, it's not like he's not without resources. I'm sure he wasn't getting paid minimum wage, to do his job there. And you look at it, is he going to come back? Does he feel like he has something to say and to contribute to the overall cultural narrative and the war going on? I can't believe he doesn't. Tomorrow's Vortex, were highlighting some of his speech at Heritage on Friday night. And it was blistering. It was really very blistering. He kept saying, I don't want to get theological, and then he went and got theological. Talking about good and evil and this and that. And I'm like,
it was such a good talk.
Yeah, it was a great talk. Like, Tucker, you may not be meaning to be theological, but I don't know any way you could describe it other than theological.
And I thought it was so interesting when he actually said, look, the way that I used to approach these policy issues was I would just draw on rational arguments. We'd have a debate. It's like, I don't approach things like that anymore because I can't explain the way that our politicians are actively working to destroy our country. It makes no rational sense. So it's like something else is at work here that's much bigger, and it's a spiritual war. And he actually said, why don't you guys pray? Like, pray. He was actually telling everyone there, pray daily.
Yeah, can you take 10 minutes a day to pray?
Like,
and I'm Episcopalian. I thought it was very funny, Brad, how he kept throwing Episcopalianism under the bus.
We should pray for Tucker Carlson for his conversion to the Catholic faith.
Absolutely.
Because he has already a very Catholic way of thinking. He doesn't get everything right. I mean, he's gone soft on gay marriage because his producer at the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show was in a gay marriage, so he did go soft on that. But you know what? Like I said, he's an Episcopalian. What do you expect?
Yeah, it's like expecting Donald Trump to, come out and be, swinging for the fences on everything Catholic. He doesn't, yes, Melania is Catholic. Nobody's ever been tried to like figure out like what exactly is that marriage? Is it valid? Is it not? Was there an annulment? There's just not enough information out there. But Melania says a rosary every day. We've been told that publicly. I presume that that's the truth. So there's something Catholic going on there. But to expect Donald Trump or Tucker Carlson or any of these guys, to come out and be promoting encyclicals and Catholic thought and Leo the 13th social justice and or social teaching and all of that. I mean, it's silly to expect that to be the case. But you can certainly have underlying Catholic principles and foundational issues, and it seems like he certainly has, I don't know, fallen into that world, tripped into that world, been sort of led there just by his own, man of goodwill stuff. It's hard to say, but he certainly is saying an awful lot of stuff. And, that whole J6 thing with his video, I mean, you're right. They were wigging out over that. And once again, the guys on the right, Mitch McConnell, I shouldn't be airing those things. They're very disturbing, blah, 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 which is kind of the topic of today's show about like sort of the phony right. And, politics makes strange bedfellows. Who are you supposed to get in bed with if you're a faithful Catholic? There's not really an option, at least not really an option of trying to realize some political victory. Your candidate's going to get in the White House. We were talking over the weekend about RFK Jr. And what did you say? You said, he's got some great stuff and blah, blah. I just wish he'd get his abortion stuff right and all the rest of it. But, it's, I mean, if you're a Democrat and you're a lukewarm Catholic, you're going to, the choice is Biden or RFK, and I think you got to pull the lever for RFK. Now, in the general election, you got to not pull it for him because of the abortion thing, but this is a confounded mess right now.
Well, the fact that Tucker would actually, you'll get into that later on, but the fact that he would bring up the Athenians, which is the perennial philosophy,
right?
That's a check mark. That's like, okay, you're going to start seeing and analyzing things correctly. Number two, when he starts putting on a spiritual lens, that means you're also starting to consolidate things correctly, where it's not rational on this level, so we need to take it up to another level where it is rational, which are two authenticators for me in his talk. So I really expect good things coming from him. And I have so few people out there that really are trustworthy.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's the point. I mean, somebody who I think probably most conservatives had, certainly Catholic conservatives, Orthodox Catholic politically conservatives, I think that sort of set the guardrails there on that, would have looked at somebody, for example, like Matt Schlapp. He's head president of ACU and runs CPAC and Conservative Political Action Committee, and he's got all this stuff going on. And heck, right over there, about 20 feet from here, we interviewed him in October before 2020, and he was Catholic. Actually had lunch with him here in Detroit locally before that. Had a good talk. He was very, despairing of where the country would go if Biden won, and then we carried that conversation on air. And then, 15 months later, I do an interview with him, and you're like, wait a minute. And just so people know, to set the stage before we show this quick soundbite, we had been contacted by his publisher to do an interview with him on his book about, I can't remember the exact title, but it was how Catholicism is going to save the world or something like that. So here's a Catholic man, father, husband, publishing a book on Catholicism and how it's going to save the whole, world and country and everything else. And it's being, published by the premier Catholic publishing house and the whole bit. And so imagine my shock when I start to get into some issues about the book and he just completely whiffs on everything having to do with Catholic. Let's run one of the sound bites, guys. Just yes or no. Should gay men be allowed to adopt young boys?
Oh boy, I don't even know what does our church fight those positions, and I don't know what the policy position is of the church.
Well, the first if you call it policy, the teaching of the church is the two men shouldn't be together to begin with.
Yeah, I know what the church teaches in terms of sexual ethics.
Right.
But I don't know what it teaches in terms. I don't know what it lobbies for in these legislative chambers. I would say this, obviously. It is, we've gotten to this position where we've gotten away from this idea that having a father or mother is awfully important. And that's obviously what is preferred for kids when they're being raised.
I mean, do you consider two gay men who have children, whether they've gotten them through IVF or rent-a-womb or whatever it is, do you consider that a family?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah, he really, I got to say I was shocked because he was waffling around and bouncing around on the church's policy and what the church lobbies for. The church doesn't have policies and it doesn't lobby. But when that came up, he was just so, yep. I was like, did he just say yep?
Because that statement can never go away.
That's right.
Once he says it, once he outs the fact that homosexuality is in any way wrong, that's not a conservative talking point. Well, that's not going to win you over.
Part of that interview was, are you going to take down the tweet about Leah Thomas, the trans swim dude, whatever thing? And he was like, yeah, I was late at night, and I just, I'm like, okay, fine, people make mistakes. I've made a few, tweet something. I actually deleted something this morning before I tweeted it out about Biden. But granted, sometimes you just push send and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. So I asked him, you gonna take it down? He's like, no. I'm like, wait a minute, you just said it was wrong. You shouldn't have done it. You can delete your own tweet and you won't. Nope. I'm like, what? That's all, you're constantly on the right. You're constantly like, oh, what? Always.
Schlapp has been going soft in the whole homosexuality, transgenderism thing for a while. I mean, we were at CPAC. We had what was it? Who's the guy who dresses in drag and the whole? I can't remember.
Lady MAGA.
Yeah.
Lady MAGA was there and just right in your face, I mean.
All 9 feet tall of her.
Yeah. It's a guy dressed up as a girl and just going around saying, I'm conservative, vote for Trump, but you're in drag, and now you've got the whole log cabin Republicans, and I think the RNC, didn't they just launch a new outreach to gays? So they're definitely whiffing on this entire issue. And then you can't, not mention the fact that there were some gay grooming allegations against Schlapp, which have not really gone away. They haven't been disproven or refuted. So
well, he did refute. They haven't been refuted as in like beat down and exposed. He's denied them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for what that's worth.
Going on what you said about that, just yesterday, Vice released a documentary on the MAGA rappers, Forgiato, Bryson Gray, some other ones, and it was very telling. At some point, they're in Florida doing a music video or whatever, and there's this trans person who Forgiato knows, being all friendly with, whatever, and then it's Bryson Gray and the reporter, and Bryson Gray is absolutely disgusted. And he's just like, no, I'm not scared of this person. I'm absolutely disgusted. Like he says, I'm disgusted in the documentary talking about transgenderism, but also homosexuality. It's like, that's become a big right thing. It's like, okay, we can go at trans, but there's no way we're going at homosexuality. DeSantis won't do it. Trump won't touch it. None of them. And even with the beer thing we've seen recently, so Bud Light, puts out the trans thing, but no one has gone out over Guinness, Corona, Miller, Coors, Michelob, and Heineken, which all run Pride Month's ad every year. They're doing their thing.
Or the NFL, or the NBA, or anything else.
Yeah. So we'll take the most startling, the most disgusting of them. We don't stand for that. We'll make Bud Light lose $6 billion or whatever it is, which, I mean, they're not hurting that bad over because you're
less than 5% of their total capitalization.
Yeah, and it's not, and they know this storm's just going to weather. Like they fired the person, whatever that means, who okayed the ad.
Yeah.
We don't really know what that means, but we're never going to actually go all the way with it, and they know that. They're not afraid to say, even though some people didn't vote for the Respect Marriage Act, and that made them big headline news of these Republicans wouldn't vote for that. They don't love your gay or interracial marriage or whatever. But all of them, if you asked them, are you just okay with same-sex marriage? They all would have said, yeah. Like, which ones of them in the House or the Senate would have said that gay marriage just should not be allowed at all?
Yeah.
Well, there was
Good.
I mean, there was just a major shift after Obergefell, because before Obergefell, all the Republicans were like, no gay marriage, it's wrong, no, we can't. And then after it became legalized in the Supreme Court.
Were there like 31 states that had referendums or something?
Oh, absolutely. We were reporting on that.
Sorry, not referendums. They were, yeah, that's right.
State referendums. They were saying no gay marriage. And I think they're doing it basically because we don't want to subsidize gay marriage. We want to treat it like it's a marriage.
Right.
And then you get the tax breaks and all that type of thing. It might have been more financially expedient for them rather than really a moral issue. But there was, I think, up to maybe 34 or more that were actually, and then one after the other, after we got to reporting all those stories all the way up, one after the other, the courts just shot it down until finally it came to Obergefell. But I think that at Anheuser-Busch and these other places that are making all these woke decisions, it's made by people at the upper echelons. They're not hurt by anything. When you say they making these decisions, they have golden parachutes, they have severance policies, they have multi-million, they have options. The people down the line, there was a guy that tweeted about the Anheuser-Busch, said, I hope they stop making this because I can't feed my family. He's down the line, right?
Sure.
He's making his own agenda. But I would like to go in defense of Schlapp for a minute.
Have a field day.
This is Simon Spot taking a hard line, okay? The fact is, when he says, well, I don't really know the church's policy, I don't really know what they're, what they lobby for and all that. In a way, he's absolutely right. And why? Because the shepherds. We've had every single show ever we talk about, it's the shepherds. The bishops coming down. How can you be more, if that's where your fire is, how can you be hotter than the cold, lukewarm, tepid fire that's supposed to be heating everything in the fabric of America?
Just to let you know, if you'd like to hear the rest of this conversation, and it gets really, really juicy and controversial, switch right over to churchmilitant.com and finish the rest of the show watching it there.